master, medium in progress, ever learning, ever growing, and sharing her thoughts and wisdom on that. She is a former hospice nurse and has a special interest in helping people facing independent. And yes, it's still living. Our speaker.
Hello. Okay, so I'm glad to see everybody here. We're going to talk today about working through grief and loss, which is absolutely what everybody came out in the middle of the summer to talk about, I'm sure. But when I meditated on what to talk about, I was given the idea of losses and recovery from loss. Just what everybody came out, like I said. And I thought, this can't be right. I'm just kind of reflecting on my own life situations. But the thought was reinforced by a recent trip to the casino where, of course, I gleefully gave my money and I got a few minutes of endorphin-fueled Pavlovian response to the bells and the whistles and the lights, and then house always wins, so I walked away $20 poorer in 5 minutes. But what I noticed was that even though I'd lost some money, on purpose no less, I was feeling pretty good, and I started to wonder what was that all about. How come I feel happy when I just blew what would amount to half a tank of gas or a somewhat nice meal at a somewhat nice restaurant? And I realized that, yeah, Spirit is directing me, as always, and the fact I didn't feel bad about losing meant that I do in fact need to talk about loss. So here we are. We are humans, and we wish to hold on to our things, whether they are objects, money, status, relationships, pets. We acquire and we commit to things and people as part of our nature. We pair bond, and the breaking of those bonds can be devastating no matter the circumstances. We form attachments and we fight strongly against the breaking of them. We commit to things all the time. We have loans, we have mortgages, we have plans, we have relationships, friendships, marriage, children, pets, on and on, right? And we form these bonds, and then when one breaks down for any reason, we can struggle to let go, even if the loss has already occurred. Any loss will provoke a grief reaction. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross puts forth the widely accepted theory of the 5 stages of grief, which include denial, it didn't or won't happen, anger, I'm going to fight this, or you, or myself, bargaining, I'll be good, I'll change, I'll do whatever it takes if this just does not happen, depression with tears and sadness and loss of hope, and finally acceptance. It is what it is. And the stages are not linear, meaning they can occur out of order and they can occur back and forth, and we can get stuck in one or another stage. Loss hurts. Loss removes our security that someone or something will be there and creates an anxiety and a realization that we could lose other important people just as easily. It's an uncomfortable state at best and a devastating state at worst. So what do we do if we're experiencing this loss, this grief? What do we do when we've lost something or someone that we cherish and love and we can't get to a state of acceptance? It's a struggle and something I've thought about for a long time. Going back to losing my $20 in the slot machine, I didn't feel great despair at losing it, but I saw the allegory. I've had losses, we all have. Devastating losses of people I've loved, pets I've cherished, relationships, but smaller losses, $20 in the slots, or being unable to go to a show or a concert. Maybe the pandemic has affected us all with different stages of loss and different levels of that grief. It's easier to get over the small ones. The big ones are a little more tough. And I want to add, coming to terms with a loss does not always mean that we retain the sadness of the loss. Coming to terms with the loss does not always mean that we do not retain the sadness of that loss or the recognition of its significance. The great tragedies in the world these days are teaching us that lesson. Loss of lives within incomprehensible tragedy, loss of freedom, loss of rights. These are huge and these are big and should not in any way be minimized by anything I'm saying today. I am addressing today the concept of personal loss and how we as individuals and spiritual beings can begin to recover. The healing of our nation and world will require a much larger initiative, but it's one that we can take part through our various humanitarian activities and actions. But the key is to come into these larger issues with an understanding and a means of coping with the losses that we all experience on any level. So what do? When we've experienced a loss, it just doesn't come to acceptance. I've used modalities, journaling, reading, meditating, getting healings, exercise, distraction. I've talked my friends and family's ears off, and even gone to counseling sometimes to deal with some of the losses in my life. And through all that, I have come to find that true healing does not come from any of those external sources. They give you great ideas, they give you things to think about, and they give you great suggestions. And I don't think any of us here will argue against Reiki or other healing modalities. They help us feel better and they help us process the issues. But the adage of heal or heal yourself is applicable here, and truly the way to finding the light again. Something we as humans are prone to doing is using the modality of confirmation bias, meaning that we tend to seek out answers that support what we believe or what we wish to be true. We've seen this in action in the media, in the conspiracy theories, and I don't need to get into all that right here. But there is always someone to tell you something that you want to hear, and especially when you have the internet available at your fingertips, you'll find what you're looking for. And it's not to say that you shouldn't educate yourself about all the sides of an issue, but it does pose a subtle speed bump into our healing because we tend to confirm our wishes, whether that confirmation is true or not, and that's what leads us to being stuck in our grief reaction with no real means out. Take, for example, say you're mourning the death of a pet, and instead of working through your grief and allowing yourself to feel the feelings and maybe journaling it or working on getting it through your system to a state of acceptance, you maybe go on the internet and look up reasons why your pet died, and then people start telling you, well, your veterinarian should have done this or done this. Now you're finding yourself getting angry, and now you're getting yourself stuck into that anger. Maybe you're trying to sue your vet or writing letters or whatever you're doing. You have to ask yourself, that doesn't bring the pet back, that doesn't change the situation, and does it really help you to do that? And is what you read or saw even applicable? Can you trust your sources? You need to look inside yourself, and you need to find ways to find the healing without getting yourself stuck into that one specific area. Perseveration will hold you back from getting through the stages of grief and prevents the healing. But what if you can't stop? What if you can't let go of the anger or the sadness or just hoping the situation just won't be? Keep talking, keep writing, consider a counselor. You've all heard this before. If you are feeling so sad and depressed that you cannot go about your normal daily activities, it's time to start looking for extra help. It's one thing to cry, it's one thing to mourn, and those are healthy, but it's completely different if you're unable to care for yourself or those for whom you're responsible. It's a challenging task to navigate your way through grief. And if you find yourself or someone you know in a position where they are struggling, it's time to step in. Self-healing is important, but sometimes the task outweighs the means. So an interesting aside, while I was looking up information and putting this talk together, I looked into animals and how do they deal with grief? How do animals deal with grief and loss? So I read that crows will flock to the scene of another crow's death. They'll sit around, they'll shriek, they'll call, and then they'll stay for a while, and then they'll all fly off. I read on the BBC that they have been trying to retrieve, okay, that's kind of gross, but they're trying to retrieve bodies of dead dolphins to study why they died. And the other dolphins were around the body and were aggressive, and the people could not get to these bodies to study them. And a similar thing with elephants, where an elephant will die, one elephant will stay and attend to him, and then as the others are going by, they're going to stop, and they're going to sniff, and they're going to look. They're going to take time to say, okay, this happened. And you can look at our own traditions of a funeral and a wake, and you can see how we try to do that too. Those things are so important. Those are the things that give us that ritual, that thing to say, okay, this happened, I'm going to mark this occasion. Because marking it and knowing that it happened helps with that acceptance and helps you move through to get through all of these stages of grief. It's not easy, and nor is it pleasant to go through a loss. Now, those like us who have belief in higher power, whatever name we give our higher power, we have further avenues to explore. As our statement of belief says, we are all equal and we are all connected. That means you are not alone, ever. Your grief does not need to isolate you. You have others around you who feel the same. You have spirit around you to help you. Our belief in personal responsibility is a strong resonator for me. It's the golden rule. Are you going to lash out in anger at someone to whom you assign responsibility for your loss? An example like the veterinarian I was talking about. Or are you going to take responsibility for your actions and what you need to do to heal your hurting heart? And you think of the golden rule and apply it back to yourself in a circle. You can't be bad to yourself either. You do unto others as you would have them do. You do to yourself also the kind things and the things that you need to heal. We have natural law. This is probably the hardest one for me. Things happen because they happen. Nature does not allow our dogs to live a human lifespan. Nature does not allow people to live indefinitely. We lose those loved ones. And the acceptance that the physical and spiritual laws of nature are in play at all times can help with that acute loss that we feel when a loved one dies. It's not up to us when the time comes. That's where our faith and our trust in spirit comes in. And finally, the ministry of spirits and angels. We can turn to spirit, angels, universe, choose the name that works for you, and we can receive spiritual healing and advice. This has proven to us that they are with us through the gifts of healing and mediumship. We still need to do the work, but we can receive the support that we need to help us through the dark times. I'm going to share with you, at the risk of my own vulnerability, what happened to me recently. I've been working through a loss, and I was having what I described as a terribly bad day, which is probably the understatement of the year. I was home with my pets, but I felt alone. I didn't feel in that moment that I had anyone to reach out to. I didn't feel that there was anyone to reach out to me. I cried a little. I asked the universe, please don't leave me alone right now. I'm broken. Don't make me be alone like this. The house was still, the house was quiet. And I suddenly felt a hand on my upper arm. And it was so warm and it was so comforting. And there's no way to describe it other than to say it felt golden. Like there was just light coming into me. And I felt a sense of peace, but more importantly, it was a sense of presence. I really wasn't alone. After a minute or so of that, I absorbed that warmth, and my phone rang, and my very adored bonus mother was on the line, asking me how I was doing. That's spirit. That's spirit. That's truth of what we have available to all of us at all times. We are never alone, even in our darkest grief. Spirit is here now. Whether through a warm touch or working through a loved one, we are held and we are supported at all times. So I started turning this over in my mind, and I turned to the teachings, and I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong, of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, also known as Gurudev. He's an Indian guru and a spiritual leader who apprenticed under Maharishi Mahesh Yogi before starting the Art of Living Foundation. He has taught all over the world, written books, and teaches a path that instructs followers that spirituality is the enhancer of love, compassion, and enthusiasm. A quote particularly stood out to me. There are some things that we never want to let go of, but keep in mind that letting go is not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a new life. Sit with that. Letting go is a beginning, not an end. Sometimes we have to let go of things. It's an uncomfortable feeling for many of us, myself included, and I needed to strongly reflect on this. It hit me on a level. And then you think, what if I don't want to let go? What if I don't want this loss? And more importantly, what will happen to me if I do let go? These are the thoughts that consciously or unconsciously keep us from healing. My biggest struggle has been the fear of the unknown. If I accept this loss, if I do not fight or bargain or beg for it to go away, what's going to happen to me? What will happen to my life with that empty space? And what I learned is that something will come to fill that space. Something or someone will fill you up again. And like me, that could very well just be yourself. I've learned about myself and others and strengthened bonds I'd forgotten, made new friends, and I'm beginning again on a path to self-discovery and to knowledge and healing. As Gurudev said, it's the beginning of a new life. So in conclusion, yes, there are stages of grief, and yes, we all go through them. But we can also look for healing in many different ways, both in the mundane world and spiritually. The important take-home lesson here is that we are never alone. We have all experienced loss on some level or another, and we can relate to each other that way. And that while we have to focus on the earthly ways of healing, we can also always depend on spirit to help shine light in the darkness. So I'm going to close with the words of Leonard Cohen, probably taken completely out of context, but there is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in.